I know we ain't always seen eye to eye, and you find me irritating and a threat, and I like to annoy you. But right now, I need better from you, Arthur.
Okay, Micah. Whatever you say.
I ain't the bad guy you think I am, Arthur. But I am a survivor. Stick with me and you'll live.
What does it mean to be a survivor? What are you willing to do in order for self-preservation? To make sure you long outlast those around you. Those who you have fought, bled, and sacrificed besides, not as enemies, but as brothers. Micah Belle is often considered to be the most hated person in all of Red Dead Redemption 2. Given how the entire game is presented through the eyes of Arthur, the polar opposite of Micah, it's not hard to see why. Micah agitates and indirectly challenges Arthur in the early hours of the game.
Make sure the gang gets its piece.
Yeah. Like I said, big shadow, tiny tree.
And like I said, that still don't mean nothing. Get out of here.
Micah also disrupts the overall status quo and hierarchy within the gang by appealing to the narcissistic and even latent vengeful side of Dutch, resulting in Dutch making decisions he would have originally brought to the Council of Hosea and taken some sort of opinion of Arthur's, whether if it was through sheer gratitude for saving his life, seeing how useful Micah could be in the right situations, or Micah was someone for once that really understood a side of him that has always wanted to just give in to his own impulsiveness. Maybe it was a combination of all the three. Whatever the case, Dutch took a liking to this man. A man who possibly never even held the smallest amount of loyalty to Dutch. Micah could very well be loyal to none other than himself, and of course, his most valued possessions, his 2 custom Schofield revolvers with "Vengeance is hereby mine" engraved on the barrels. If Micah was to ever make it out of this life, betraying Dutch, along with every other Van der Linde gang member in the process, what life he had hoped to live would only be up to speculation. Given his own temperament and irrational behavior, prone to emotional outbursts, it's hard to imagine him living all that long, or even continuing a life on the low. A life of peaceful domestication isn't exactly something that seems would suit him all that well. And seeing how John has to put down scores of Micah's own men during the epilogue, I think it's safe to say Micah would possibly never give living a normal life a fair shot. Either being jailed and hanged, as was his fate in Strawberry, or really dying in a hail of bullets is what seems to always be waiting for him. Or even potentially hunted down like an animal by Pinkertons, realizing just how much of a problem he really is. It's doubtful Micah could ever live a normal life. While that may be an interesting topic to explore in the future, today I want to talk about Micah's allegiance, or lack thereof, to Dutch. I don't exactly want to challenge the notions of Micah already being a traitor or a rat. I think that is something entirely different. What I want to do is present with different scenarios to question the legitimacy of each individual piece of evidence of Micah's questionable allegiance and look at each one under a microscope, starting with the first big flag, Dutch's wanted poster that can be found in Micah's camp. After saving Micah from the jail cell in Strawberry, Micah continues to live remotely in the local area, scouting for potential opportunities where he can return to Dutch with a big take. Some type of gift, a form of repentance for his mistakes, if you will. And so, Micah places his sights on a local banking coach set to travel by soon. Here, the events of the mission and American pastoral scene begin to unfold. Once the mission is complete, it has come to people's attention that if you return to where Micah was camped out at, there is a wanted poster with none other than Mr. Dutch Van der Linde as the bounty. For some, a telltale sign of Micah's intentions to give this man up since the very beginning. However, maybe that isn't entirely true. Micah is said to have stepped in and saved Dutch's life when they first met each other up in the Grizzlies. And after reading this poster, the first opportunity to betray Dutch would have been right there in that bar in the initial encounter. There was no need to save Dutch, who was already about to be killed. Micah could have very well let that happen, and then kill Dutch's assailants and take the bounty for himself, possibly the best route to take, as it would end up as the least path of resistance and a healthy payday. The great Dutch Van der Linde's corpse can be turned in, and Micah can ride off, saddlebags loaded with cash with only a few bullets spent. Micah does the opposite though, and decides to save this silver-tongued fox. Why? Maybe it was the message Dutch preached. Maybe it was what he stood for. Or maybe it was as simple as Micah knew he couldn't survive on his own. And as Dutch saw Micah as someone who could be very useful in some situations, Micah saw Dutch as someone who could open doors to him and provide the one thing he couldn't get on his own, a loyal gang. One who he could rely on. One who, if need be, he can call a family.
I'm sorry, but we're family now, Arthur. You and me. Sons of Dutch. Makes us brothers. Sometimes Brothers make mistakes.
Whatever the case, Micah chose to save him that night, and he chose to continue on to ride with the gang. Now, the reason I call back to this particular scenario is because if we take a look at the bounty on Dutch's head, it's priced at only $1,000, which to me signals that this is something that predates the events of Red Dead Redemption 2. Micah's been aware of who Dutch was, and the reason why I believe it predates it is because of two reasons. First, Milton prices Arthur's own bounty at $5,000. Milton's determined to bring only Dutch down, giving the rest of the gang members ample time to disperse and maybe even try a fair chance at living a normal life. In Milton's words, a life worthy of human beings. We can say that sure, Milton maybe priced Arthur's own bounty a little higher as a form of intimidation or some kind of attempt to convince Arthur all the trouble he's willing to bring down on himself ultimately isn't worth it, because while his bounty may be so high, Milton is only after Dutch. Find it hard to believe Arthur's own bounty would be higher than the man who is considered the main culprit behind these many crimes. The literal gang is named after Dutch, and Milton was willing to excuse each and every single member for just Dutch alone. I doubt with so much attention and heat, even if in the off chance Arthur's bounty was higher, Milton would excuse it all for just Dutch by himself. On the same token, with the Van der Linde gang hitting Cornwall's train at the end of the chapter of Coulter, and Cornwall becoming a direct financier of the Pinkerton Detective Agency, with Cornwall's influx of money, interest, and the fact the gang was already wanted on the run from what transpired in Blackwater, a $1,000 bounty seems way too low. Micah would also be too far involved with the gang at this point and its own affairs to be having any sort of poster like this within his possession. Even if he did, ready to present it to the law or even a rival gang if need be, to save his own neck, this poster wouldn't be the evidence for that. The bounty's way too low for it to be valid after the events of the game have already started to take place. So I personally don't believe this bounty is entirely relevant. It can be, but I think when you take everything into consideration, it has to be before the events of Red Dead Redemption 2. And then there's the matter of the next flag. Micah's absence in the earlier hours of the game and his refusal to stand his ground, or even take major action when the gang needs him most. I have pointed out before Micah's lack of action when Arthur went missing after he, Dutch, and Micah decided to ride out and meet with Colm. Even though it was a meeting that was orchestrated by Pearson, the fact Micah seemed so willing and eager to push Dutch to sue for peace, a direct contradiction to Micah's own rash, aggressive tendencies. He of all people should understand the hatred that Dutch has for Colm, yet in a twist of fate, he appears to push Dutch so hard to at least hear Colm out. In a previous video, I mentioned how despite Arthur, Dutch, and Micah all agreeing to a meetup point after the meeting with Colm took place, as a sort of safety measure, Arthur obviously didn't make it to this meetup, and yet neither Dutch nor Micah decided to go and look out for Arthur, who was missing. Yet, unbeknownst to Dutch, at least, Arthur was in the possession of Colm, trying to use him as bait to turn Dutch and his men into the law in order to buy himself time.
Let me go, Colm, and end all this crap between you two. We all got real problems now.
The way I see it, they get him, they forget about me.
Whether if Micah had a direct or indirect hand in this for certain can be debatable. At least that was a stance some people had before. But what can't be argued is Micah's lack of initiative to mount a rescue mission for who he claimed was his quote-unquote brother. It's also quite apparent at Arthur's return to camp, Micah can be seen in the background, completely unbothered by Arthur's return. Sure, it could be viewed as Micah's attempt to get rid of Arthur. By doing nothing or refusing to get up or rile Dutch up to go and look out for Arthur was potentially his way of trying to push Arthur's absence under the rug. With Arthur gone, after all, Micah would have unrivaled access to Dutch, and with that, the ear of the will of the Van der Linde gang. On the one hand, this was a move to show to Arthur just how much Micah truly cared for him. Arthur saved his skin back in Strawberry, although at the behest of Dutch. Now, even though he is technically indebted to Arthur, here he is, refusing to do the same. It's one thing to quietly trying to get rid of an obstacle like Arthur, however, it's a completely different thing when you refuse to back up the other members as he does later on. This is actually a moment that has passed over my head countless times, and it wasn't until recently that it was brought to my attention. The battle of Shady Belle picks up immediately after the Van der Linde gang burns down Braithwaite Manor. Revenge for kidnapping young Jack Marston. This is the mission where Milton and Ross walk in the heart of the Van der Linde camp, confront Dutch, threaten every member here, and even offer a deal. Surrender Dutch, and they all get to walk. This singular cutscene displays what is possibly the greatest level of unity the gang has ever had for each other and even for Dutch. Dutch lets his oratory skills run on full display, mockingly offering to give himself up, only for every single Van der Linde member to load and cock all of their weapons.
Ain't that fine?
I don't want to kill all these folk, Dutch. Just you.
In that case, it'd be my honor to join you. Excuse me, friends. I have an appointment to keep with...
Dutch may be a wanted man. Their homes may have been discovered, and they will be damned. These men of the law foolishly believed Dutch would be given up without a fight. Every member, from the trusted adopted sons such as Arthur and John, down to the less trusted and even feeble-minded members such as Strauss, Reverend, and Kieran, all stand shoulder to shoulder, ready for a fight, except Micah. Micah's not only absent from this entire scene, but he can even be seen walking in the background, leisurely heading for his horse. Some, similar to the wanted poster, has cited this as another pivotal moment where Micah was a rat all along, luring the Pinkertons here and refusing to fight them when he already struck a deal. However, again, I don't think that is entirely true. It's plausible for sure, but seeing how Milton's introduction to the gang members goes to show he doesn't quite know who is who or even potentially how many members hold the ranks of the Vanderlyn gang, he doesn't know who John is, he presumes Hosea, and the only person that he knows besides Arthur is Dutch.
Good day, fine people. Mr. Vanderlyn, Mr. Matthews, I presume. And who are you?
Rip Van Winkle.
Huh. Good day, sir.
Micah could be very well aware of this, and rather than fight, stand his ground with people who are staring in the face of a reckoning. All their days are numbered. Maybe he knew Dutch was a very wanted man, only growing in infamy, and the reality of this man being killed or captured was high, and only continuing to grow day by day, worsening as long as they had no money and continued to go score to score. He may not have sold them out to the Pinkertons just yet, but he wasn't ready to take the chance of being assigned a death sentence with the Vanderlyn members. As he said himself time and again, he is a survivor after all. But if that's true and he's not ready to stand his ground with the Vanderlyn gang, that raises one question. By him going out, revealing his face in the Saint Denis bank robbery, a robbery that most likely Milton or any other surviving Pinkerton members could have seen his face, what next? Well, that paints the next scenario in a different light. As we all know, during the end of the game, when Arthur goes to save Sadie and Abigail from Milton, Milton reveals to Arthur that Micah has been a rat all along. Milton picked up Micah back when they returned from the island of Guarma. And ever since then, Micah's been revealing information to the Pinkertons. There is so much that can be broken down about this interaction. So many people refuse to believe that Milton could even be lying to Arthur, which I think was always a possibility, but we'll leave that for a different video entirely. Let's talk about Micah revealing information to Milton. We don't know the details. We don't know the extent, we don't know the nature, we don't know the quality of the information, the type of communication that was being kept between them, or how close of an eye Milton and the Pinkertons were even keeping on Micah. So far, the picture I have painted, though, is one that admits Micah doesn't have undying loyalty to Dutch, something that's been pretty much common sense. He doesn't care about any of the other members, or even Dutch to a degree. His main concern is himself, and he's aware of how far he can go with and without Dutch. I believe Micah was aware that he needed and depended on Dutch, and counted on Dutch's good graces and the love and respect Dutch commanded from other people to ensure that he himself was taken care of. If Micah betrayed the gang and really did feed information to the Pinkertons behind everyone's back, I believe the information Micah would have given the Pinkertons would have been information that was credible, something that was just enough to ensure if things went south with Dutch or the gang and they all ended up at the mercy of the law, he could then claim he was a double agent. On the flip side, in order to save face with Dutch, seeing how during Beaver Hollow, Micah's starting to call the shots and even making moves on behalf of Dutch, it wouldn't be too difficult for him to place Arthur and even John on the types of jobs that would cause more, in Dutch's words, noise. The jobs where the gang is being more bold, more ambitious, more careless. In this way, Micah could claim to Dutch, Arthur, and John were conspiring against him and were in contact with the Pinkertons, something Dutch already admitted to having a suspicion of when they were trapped on the island of Guarma.
So what happened with John in that bank?
He survived. Unlike dear Hosea and Lenny, the only one they took alive. Why is that, you think?
I don't know. I was already on the roof. I didn't see it.
And Abigail, I presume she was able to slip away in time.
What are you talking about?
You know, when I look back at all the chaos of the past few weeks, the apparent superficial chaos, I begin to wonder, maybe, for somebody, this is all going exactly to plan.
Later on, during just a social call, Micah continues to plant the idea that there is a rat.
Micah reckons there's a rat.
Oh, does he? On what evidence?
He's only back a minute. Pinkerton show up.
We've been on the run since you two fools went crazy in Blackwater.
At this point in time, Dutch has already shown a growing coldness towards Abigail and John. It was just a bigger hurdle to convince Dutch Arthur was in the same camp as well, something Arthur gradually was put in by just being placed on the same jobs as John, and even in Dutch's eyes continuing to side with John, such as saving him from Cynic Penitentiary, and even insisting that Dutch should let the Marstons go. Micah this way was put in a uniquely blessed position. Anything went wrong in Dutch's eyes can be placed on the Marstons and Arthur. Anything went wrong in the Pinkertons' eyes, Micah could play the role of an insignificant gunman that knew nothing of Dutch's grander ideas, and fed as much information as he possibly could to them. After all, from our perspectives, there's no evidence saying concretely that the Pinkertons were aware of who Micah was, or his affiliation with the Vanderlyn gang, or even a personal tie to Dutch. At the end of the day, Micah being a rat wasn't to serve the Pinkertons, it wasn't to serve Dutch, or really destroy the Vanderlyn gang. I believe with Micah's own philosophy, he was willing to do any and everything to ensure that he survived, that he made it through the day, and that meant being all too willing to play both sides. Micah's selfish, Micah's hot-headed, he's temperamental, but he's not an idiot. And I'm going to present this to you. What do you think about all this? What do you think the position Micah was in? And how do you perceive the wanted poster, Micah's lack of action when it came to Arthur being taken for a hostage, the Pinkertons showing up in the heart of the Clemens Point camp, or even the validity of Milton claiming that Micah was a rat? And even if that is true and Micah was indeed the rat, what do you think the information was? What do you think the role Micah played as a rat? Do you agree with the perspective I have? How much does it differ? Let's talk down in the comment section below. But like always, guys, thank you so much for watching. My name is Cynic. If you have any suggestions or recommendations or anything else you want me to cover, doesn't even necessarily have to be Red Dead Redemption 1 or 2, please share it down below in the comments. But until next time, I'll see you all later.